What's up guys, welcome to this video. In this one, I'm breaking down the hip flip series. This is a series I use a lot with myself or with athletes I train before a workout or before practice. What I like about it is that you're getting a ton of reps at all different angles. You're loading your ankles, knees, and hips in different directions. It's low intensity, or what I'd call extensive plyometrics. And if you're not super familiar with that word, plyometrics are just exercises where you get a very rapid stretch and then contract really fast. So think about stuff like jumping, skipping, or hopping. We can break down these simply into extensive plyos, which are low intensity, low effort, and higher reps, or what most people are probably familiar with, which is intensive plyometrics, which are high effort or max intent, like bounds or max effort jumps. And in training, I think it's a really good idea to have a good base of extensive plyometrics to then support the intensive plyometrics. If we compare it to throwing, it's the same idea. You don't just throw hucks all day, you work on short throws. Or in the weight room, you don't only lift heavy weights, you build with volume, so higher reps with lower weight. Extensive plyometrics give us a good base of handling those springy, faster forces at, again, all different angles. Because it's low intensity, I use this hip flip series as a warm-up, but it also gives us a nice training effect. So it's kind of a two birds, one stone situation. And really quick, I know a lot of you just want to skip ahead to the exercises, and I don't blame you, but give me 2 minutes to just explain the science of why I think this is really important. Because on Instagram, I post a lot of book recommendations or research articles, and I get a lot of DMs asking for the summary or the takeaways. So this is it, with visuals and drills. So let me break down the science for you before we get into the drills themselves. Okay, here are the two biggest things that I need to make sure that we are on the same page about before we get into the drills. Number one is that change of direction has three main parts to it. First is we decelerate. This can be over a couple of steps, or typically that second to last step, known as the penultimate step, takes on a lot of this work. Secondly, we plant and then redirect our momentum to then step three, finally re-accelerate back out. And what I really like about the hip flip series is it has elements of all three of these. And to clarify, I'm not saying this is the way that you should cut every single time. Some specific moves like the jump cut might use some different steps, and this is why it is a different move. Same with how cuts in basketball might look different from cuts in soccer. The type of cut or change of direction you use in a game depends on what you're trying to do, the task, what's going on around you, the environment, or what your body does well, your individual traits. So we have to understand that these are common principles that you see across a lot of change direction and cutting, but they're not hard rules or a perfect model that you have to follow. And my goal is to help teach you these common principles and the research and science behind it by using this hip flip series as an example. Now, the other thing that I need you to understand that is super important is that cutting is a subconscious skill. When we do something really fast, it becomes a subconscious process. When you're actually in the game, you don't have time to think, okay, shift weight, plant the right foot, turn my hips. Our body develops the reflexes, the coordination, and the timing to subconsciously complete these movements. It's the same idea as throwing. You don't think, okay, bend elbow, rotate hips, flick your wrist. Your body just does it. And if you did think about it, you'd be very slow and inefficient. And there's a lot of research showing that if you do try to consciously think about what you're doing when doing something fast, or what's known as thinking internally, that you can actually perform worse. One study had some athletes react to a starting gun and then sprint 10 meters. They found the group that was told to think internally was significantly slower than the other groups. Or another study done here where the researchers found that by just encouraging and giving no cues, the participants actually performed a lot better than the group that they gave cues to on how to complete the task. So then that raises the question, if we aren't good at something and want to get better, but thinking about it can hurt our performance, then what are we supposed to do? One option can be what's called external cueing. In our sprint example, instead of cues that focus internally, like explode through your hip or flex your hip to get your knee up, we can use cues that focus externally or outside the body, like push the ground away. And even simpler, I like external motivation, like timing every rep and trying to beat it, or just racing somebody. But external cues or racing somebody when trying to get better at change direction can be pretty difficult. So our second option is just repetition. And of course, this isn't just throwing you into the deep end with a bunch of cutting drills and just hoping you figure it out, but properly planned and progressed drills that expose your body to better positions could be beneficial to feel how these movements are. So instead of overthinking it, your body starts to figure it out. You're not trying to send conscious signals to your muscles telling them what to do. You're just exposing your body to good movement and letting it feel out what works best. And if you have a smart and good progression of drills, then that improvement can happen pretty well. Okay, thanks for sticking with me through the science. Let's get into the exercises. There's going to be 5 parts to this hip flip series, and the first one is the forward deceleration. This isn't trying to mimic anything super specific. It's just about building the ability to stop quickly when you're facing forward. You'll see this kind of stop all the time in Ultimate, especially in smaller spaces like the backfield. It seems simple, but honestly, it's something I've seen a lot of people really struggle with. And I can already picture some of you cringing at the thought of your knees doing this. Now, there's this phrase in medicine that I really like. The difference between the poison and the antidote is the dosage. So if your knees hurt when you cut, it's not because cutting is inherently bad. They might just not be ready for that amount of force yet. the dosage is too high. But if you back off the intensity and then gradually build back up in intensity and volume while staying pain-free and supporting it with stuff in the gym like strengthening, mobility, and stability, then you can give your body a chance to build back up the strength and coordination it needs while cutting. This drill gives you reps of landing, absorbing, and controlling momentum in a safe, low-intensity way. And what I really like about it is it's self-limiting. You control how hard you hit the ground. You can start light, or if you're more advanced, work on attacking the ground hard and popping back up quick. A big common mistake I see is people staying too upright and just reaching with their foot. We've all heard we need to get low when we cut. A big principle when we cut is lowering our center of mass because it makes it easier to then control our cuts. What I like about this drill is it gives you a low intensity, controlled way to get your body used to actually bending while moving fast and dealing with some force. And that's something a lot of people struggle with. But if you stay upright and just reach, you don't teach your lower body and torso to bend together, which means you're not actually learning how to drop your hips, bend into the knee, and get low when it matters. And another thing is it makes it really hard to break effectively. By keeping your center of mass back behind your foot, now when you push, there's nowhere to go. You can't really push yourself back if you're already back. So it limits how well we can break, it reduces control while we're decelerating, and it can increase the amount of stress at the knee. By getting low and bending, you bring your center of mass more over the foot. That helps you load the posterior chain, the glutes, the hamstrings, and all that. And now you're in a position to push back strong. That's how you can apply that force more effectively and safely. All right, next up, we've got two variations that I usually group together, the forward and backwards crossover step. One where you're stepping in front of your body and one where you're stepping behind. If we break it down slowly, you can see each time it's 4 steps. You want to touch the line with your outside foot, and then that foot is coming back so that your hips are squared. Again, this is happening with the foot coming forward and the foot coming behind. With these, we're not trying to do a full crossover step. We aren't even really trying to mimic a specific move in Ultimate. I use these as simple ways to help athletes get used to flipping their hips without letting the whole upper body follow. And what we're targeting with that is a thing called disassociation, or how well you can get the upper and lower body to move independently. And this is something you're gonna see all the time in Ultimate. Running deep, you might be looking over your shoulder at the thrower or for the disc. Defensively, this allows you to scan the field or keep your eyes on your person without 100% committing to a specific direction. You'll see this a ton in basketball, where players are very good at disassociating the upper and lower body, and I think a lot of handler defense and basketball defense is very similar. And lastly, one study found that athletes who could turn their torso in the direction they were going before their lower body experienced faster cuts. And also, this drill is just great for building general coordination and rhythm. The backwards one especially gets you moving that foot 90 degrees behind and touching a spot you can't see with your eyes, so you're building really good body awareness and spatial awareness while moving quickly. For common mistakes, the big one I see is, of course, turning the whole body, which kills the whole purpose of the drill. Good addition I like for this is holding a disc out in front of you. And you can see here when I went out to record this, I forgot my discs, which probably explains why I'm a bad thrower, so I'm holding my crock out in front of me. But this acts as a visual reminder to keep the torso forward. If you see what's out in front of you is also rotating, then you know that your whole torso is turning. So really focus on keeping it out in front. Another common mistake I'll see is not fully rotating the hips back and forth. I've seen a lot of people do this where they know they need to have their hips flip, but then they end up kind of just keeping their hips flip the whole time. So we don't get as much of that rotation back and forth. I really like the cue of imagining you are wearing a laser pointer on your belt buckle. So at the start, the laser is pointing forward, and then as you cross over, that laser is pointing 90 degrees to the side. So it's constantly scanning this 90-degree arc. And remember not to rush the reps. This is for coordination, not for conditioning or for speed. And don't be too passive either. Really try to be crisp with your reps to keep the quality of the movement. Next up, we got the crossover step rhythm. This one's all about being bouncy and snappy. You're doing small crossover steps, but now you're adding a little hop in between each one. We're not trying to jump super high with these. The point here is to rebound quickly. We're using the momentum of each crossover step to jump up, and then learning to use the landing from the jump to then rebound into the next cut. What we're tapping into here is what's called the stretch shortening cycle. Basically, your body's ability to quickly absorb force and then use that stored energy to push back out. You'll see this in pretty much all athletic movement. It's almost impossible to make a list of just all the movements that we use the stretch shortening cycle for. And there's some good research that backs this up too. They found that athletes that spend shorter amounts of time on the ground during a change of direction can decelerate more efficiently and cut a lot faster. So in my opinion, this is a very basic but good way to get used to being light and quick off the ground. Something minor we get with this too is learning how to reposition our foot. You can see on the landing that my foot isn't coming down in the same exact spot that I jumped from. It lands slightly outside of my body to then help push me in the direction I want to go. This is again one of those universal principles. During a good change of direction, the base of support or the foot will position itself outside of your center of mass to more effectively get a good push in the direction that you want to go. And from my experience, I've seen a lot of people not naturally do this, so this this is a great way to subconsciously start to ingrain it. Most common mistake I'll see is people spending too much time on the ground. Again, the goal of this is to spend the least amount of time on the ground as possible. So when we do the crossover or when we land, we don't want there to be any pause. By getting off the ground quickly, we're using a lot more of that stored energy to help move us in the direction we want to go. But by pausing, our body has to work harder to then get us moving again. So it's more energy used. Being quick off the ground again helps us to become just a little bit more efficient. And the second one is having your whole body face the same direction. We're trying to work some of that disassociation again. So the goal is to keep the upper body steady while the lower body rotates. So keep your chest forward and have the lower body crossing over to each direction. And last but not least, number 5 is the hip swivel back pedal. This one's probably the most complex out of the series and the first one where we're actually moving backwards. You're backpedaling and flipping your hips side to side. In slow motion, you can see it's a constant cycle of crossover steps, then flip the hips, then crossover step. And this drill gets that general body awareness once again. Being able to be coordinated and controlled while moving backwards is super important in Ultimate. And it also helps reinforce that disassociation again. You'll see this in a lot of high-level defenders where they're constantly adjusting their hips while keeping their torso locked in on the play. It's what helps you stay reactive while still taking in a lot of visual information. The research also supports that repositioning your hips while maintaining torso orientation helps with perceptual control. This basically means that you're able to take in information more effectively. Probably the biggest common mistake I've seen this with very, very high level players too, is when people step, they flip everything together and then they step again. So there's this slight pause between each crossover step to then flip the entire body. We want to stay fluid and moving. Now, this version that I'm showing, or what's the correct version, is a little bit harder, but it forces our feet to move faster, which is challenging our coordination and our hips to rotate even more while trying to stay balanced. So again, it's great for overall coordination and body awareness. And once again, keep that chest forward. Don't let your entire body rotate with you. We want to get that disassociation. To put it all together now, like I said at the beginning, I really like this as kind of a warm-up or a low-level introduction. So I'll do this before a field workout or sometimes before practice. So after you've done your dynamic warm-up, you could do this series. Very, very generally, I'd recommend 2 sets of the forward deceleration, forward and backwards crossover steps. You could do 10 reps of each exercise on each side. Combine that with some of the crossover step rhythms. You could do 2 sets of 5 reps on each side, and then the hip swivel back pedal for 2 sets of about 20 yards. But if you do it with enough intensity and intent, it gives you that nice training effect, which leads into the rest of your warm-up really nicely. But also, if you do it frequently enough, that can really compound and add up, and I think can be very beneficial for some people. And I need to be very, very clear that these are not going to just magically transform you into a better cutter. Make sure to still combine these with faster cuts, explosive movements, and good quality training to really maximize your cutting improvements though. It's also important to note that based on your skill level or athleticism level, this series could have very different effects for you. If you grew up playing basketball, for example, your body is probably going to be pretty good at these because basketball is a lot of change of direction. Your body naturally got these movements by playing the sport. However, for players that don't come from a background of playing a sport with a lot of change of direction, I've seen this series work really well because it gets your body exposed to positions that you might not really have been in before. So just know that somebody newer to Ultimate or working out might get a lot more benefit out of this than somebody that's already super advanced. And if you're interested in a coaching plan that can incorporate some stuff like this and be customized to your goals and needs, check out the links down below to learn a little bit more about my one-on-one coaching. Otherwise, drop any questions you got down below in the comments, and thank you guys very much for watching.